Good afternoon. It's good to see you. And welcome to our meeting. This is our annual political forum. We try and do this on a regular basis in the fall. And as you've just heard, we will soon be celebrating our 20th year of presenting monthly nonpartisan programs that focus on civic issues of importance to our community. As part of that mission, over the years we've hosted mayoral candidates, county executive candidates, gubernatorial candidates, U.S. Senate candidates, and 4 years ago, we even hosted the 4 candidates then running for the position of commissioner for the Port of Bellingham. So before we begin today's program, our superb program committee chair, Don Keenan, who's going to wave at the back of the room, there you go, has asked me to tell you about our October and November programs. On October 23rd, we welcome back to the City Club, after a long absence, the award-winning political correspondent and columnist for the Vancouver Sun, Vaughn Palmer. According to his most recent email, among other topics, he will inform us about, quote, the recent provincial election, the new premier's mandate, the continuing battle over pipelines, and should BC become a banana, in quotes, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody, republic. As always, Vaughn will be informative, interesting, and entertaining. On the 20th of November, we have a program that dovetails with Watkin Museum's Vanishing Ice exhibit. Michelle Copps from the University of British Columbia will show and talk about changes in our region's glacier system. She will be joined by Bill Dewey from the Taylor Shellfish Farms, who will inform us about increasing ocean acidification and its impact on our shellfish industry. That's our little version of ski to sea, and that'll be in November. Today, we are very pleased to welcome to the City Club the candidates for Port District 1, Dan Robbins and Renata Kowalczyk, and the candidates for Port District number 2, incumbent Mike McAuley and his challenger Ken Bell. Of course, none of us, besides myself, need reminding that all of us can vote for a candidate from each district, regardless of where we live in the county. So our format today, and as I talk about this, the candidates really take the stage. I should have made that clear earlier. So as I talk about the format, the candidates will take their place on the table. That's designed so they can't hear and focus on what the format is, so they'll be confused. Anyway, our format today is designed by our program committee to elicit from the candidates their views and their values on the major issues facing the Port of Bellingham. In order to fit in as many questions as possible in our limited time, we will strictly adhere to the following schedule. Each candidate will have a 1.5-minute opening statement. Our timekeeper, Jack DeLay, will raise a yellow card with 10 seconds left. And if the candidate has not stopped after 10 seconds, Jack will raise a red card. And I will proceed to the next candidate. After the opening statements, I will ask a question, and each candidate will have 1 full minute to respond. Again, the 10-second yellow card and the final red card will apply. If the candidate feels a need to respond to something his or her opponent has said, they are free to do so when their turn rolls around again. We will continue this process until it's time to turn the question over to our badge-wearing members. As always, our members will ask a specific, well-thought-out, and pithy question. They will not make speeches. We do ask that the member questions be directed to a specific candidate. The 1-minute rule will still apply in their responses. And if another candidate wants to respond as well, they are free to do so. At the conclusion of the member questions, each candidate will have a 1-minute closing statement. We will finish our time together on or before 1:30. So, all that said, welcome.
Thank you.
So for our opening statements, I think we'll just start with Renata and go down the list, and then I'll ask the first question.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Bellingham City Club, for the opportunity to be here. Some folks know me here. I've been a member since 2010, but I'd like to introduce myself to you so you know who I am. My name is Renata Kowalczyk, and I am a living proof that American dream is possible. I grew up in Poland under the oppressive communist regime. I came from a long line of farmers, but our farm was too small for us to sustain ourselves. So my parents decided to leave. But rather to depend on governmental handouts that the communist regime wanted us to, we continue coming back and farming together. I came to the United States with 20 bucks in my pocket and a dream of America. I became the first in my family to earn a college degree, and I later obtained an MBA from Columbia Business School. My proudest moment was becoming an American citizen in 1997. I found work in financial sector in New York, became vice president in a few of the large corporations, including JP Morgan Chase and Merrill Lynch. And I eventually fulfilled another dream, home ownership. But there was something missing in my life. After working for years in New York, I yearned for living in a place where real people live, where we make and build things, like tangible things, the community like ours. So I chose Whatcom County as my new home, and now I would like to give back. I thought long and hard where my skills in financial management, process improvement, and Lean Six Sigma could be useful, and after careful deliberations with business leaders, I chose running for Port Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you. Whoa, a little loud. Thank you very much for inviting us today and being involved in the political process. I'm Dan Robbins, and I'm running for Port Commissioner in the 1st District. I'm a lifelong resident with deep roots in this community. I'm married to Kathy Robbins, who's been a school teacher in the Bellingham School District for 30-plus years. We have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. I'm a graduate of Western Washington University with a degree in industrial technology. I have owned 7 successful businesses and served on 9 boards. I have volunteered for the past 10 years as a mentor for SCORE, Service Corps of Retired Executives. We're counselors to America's small business. I'll bring a wealth of successful business experience and job creation to the Port Commission. My basic reason for running for Port Commissioner is very simple: jobs. There's no question which comes first, the chicken or the egg. We need the jobs to have the amenities that we all enjoy. Playing a leadership role in helping develop our waterfront is a challenge that I look forward to. I'll bring a balanced approach and common sense to the Port Commission. I look forward to your questions, ideas, and concerns about the Port of Bellingham and the future of our wonderful waterfront. Thank you.
Good timing. Thank you. Ken?
My name is Ken Bell, and it was nice of him to tell us that this is over in an hour because we know when the paint ends. We've been doing a lot of these forums lately, and hopefully this will be as enlightening to you as it is entertaining. My name is Ken Bell. I'm in the, my company is called Best Recycling. Started my company in 1994. Started by buying recycling companies from Weyerhaeuser Corporation that were failing. They owned a lot of waste paper recycling companies across the country. And started basically by turning those companies around into profitable operations. And then I sold them in 2000, got them back, sold them again. But it was one of those experiences that gave me some real life experience in shipping some things from ports. I mean, I'm in the recycling business. We ship to China. We ship all over the world through those operations. Transformed my business then into an operation where we specialize in hard to get to places. My company now does work in Antarctica. We are the sole contractor for removing waste materials. There's a treaty in Antarctica that says that everything that goes in has got to come out. So our job is to get everything out. And I've got a crew of 22 that go in and make sure that we get everything out of Antarctica as we're supposed to. My job is to do specialty places. I'm running for the port today because I've only got 10 seconds. Because I'm sitting in my office and overlooking the port, which is the Bellwether building, and the port.
Thank you, Ken.
I'm sure he's going to be back next week.
Mike, you're up.
Hi, I had the honor of being here 4 years ago and addressing many of the people that I see here today, and it is an honor to come back and do it again. It's been a pretty amazing 4 years for me. When I first thought of running for the Port Commission, I spent about a year planning and making sure that I was the right person for the job, both for me from an emotional and skills sense, but also for the community overall. And I think that I've been the right person for the job for the past 4 years. I am asking the voters to put me back in office so I can continue working on some things that I've started. And if you look at our port, we have a very unique port. This might be news to the folks sitting up here. There are 75 ports in our state. There are only about 15 in the entire nation, like the Port of Bellingham. We have marinas, we have boat yards, we have shipyards, we have the third fastest growing airports, or the fastest growing airport west of Mississippi. It is the third largest in the state. We operate the Amtrak station, we operate the Greyhound station, we operate a free trade zone on behalf of our nation's economy. It's not a typical port, and it's been great. It's been a great deal of fun learning how to make good decisions on behalf of our economy, both for here in Whatcom County, but also in our region. And it's been really fun actually looking for that new business that we'll be expanding into, and it looks like it might be Alaska.
Good, thank you. So now we'll start the round of questions. I think, Ken, we'll start with you, give you an opportunity, and then we'll go to Mike and come back. Number one, the question is, do you think the port's current plan to develop the waterfront correctly balances the various community interests, specifically environmental issues, industrial use, open public space, retail, housing, liquefaction, and rising sea levels? You have a minute. So do you think that
Not a chance that you can give an adequate answer to that in a minute, but I'll give you the short answer on that. It's a long process. At the end of the day, the port is going to be driven by a vision of what we can attract there, and the vision of the waterfront needs to be one where we provide companies with the cleanest, most user-friendly place that we can give them. And the balance has yet to be played out. I noticed that they're still arguing over where trails should go. I'm going to let that play out. But at the end of like I said, at the end of the day, it is going to be a balance between what we want to do and where we want to go with this port. And I'm in favor of bringing working wage jobs, and that's what's really going to drive our decisions. If you look at the way I'm going to look at life, it's going to be, how do we make this waterfront the most user-friendly? How do we make use of the assets that this port has in a reliable way? This is a unique opportunity. There isn't a community out there that has this kind of waterfront access with the type of opportunity we have. You're not going to be my friend by the end of this, Jack.
Thank you. Mike McAuley, same question.
It's been a huge amount of public process, and I applaud the public process, and I like the public process, but I think we're pretty close to being done with that part of the waterfront planning. Is it balancing everything? It's balancing everything. Is it balancing everything well? Not quite, and there's still some parts of the conversation that have to be taken care of. I'm proud to say that in the waterfront plan there was in regards to the shipping terminal, there was only about 1/3 of the amount of space originally in the plan to serve the shipping terminal, and I argued against that, and I fought for tripling of the amount of land available to serve our shipping terminal. So that's something I'm very proud of. I did take a shot, excuse me, from some of my environmentalist friends who thought that there should be more habitat set asides and that sort of thing. But the Port of Bellingham is challenged with providing the infrastructure and the support for our economy. We can and should balance the environments in all of those business dealings, but the first job of the port is still working in support of our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins?
Yes, thank you. For the most part, my answer to that question would be yes. The Planning Commission has done a good job, and they worked through it. Kelly Linville and the mayor, Kelly Linville, and Rob Fix, the executive director of the port, both stood there next to each other and gave the preliminary plan at this point, both their blessing, and said that it looks good. I hope we don't get saddled down with it, should the sidewalks be 12 feet wide or 12 feet 6 inches, or what are we going to do with a harbor seal that jumped in the log pond? Are we still going to be able to have an industrial site there? It's zoned industrial. And I think it's important to do everything we can to balance it all, but you have to understand, if we want jobs, we have to look at it as an industrial site first.
Thank you. Ms. Kowalczyk?
Thank you. So this is one of the largest and most impactful undertaking for our community, and I'm really appreciating the thoughtful process that it's taking and the participation that community is taking as well. I think it's really important that Port Commission and the City Council will be continuing working sessions, so there will be more opportunity to contribute thoughts and ideas. I agree with Michael McAuley that yes, it's trying to balance everything, and it's probably not doing everything very well. I am a huge supporter of working waterfront and supporting our marine trades, and I'm very happy to see that not only we have committed industrial zoning there, but I'd like to make sure that it actually remains marine trades. This is our bread and butter in terms of our economy. I'd also like to see a much better connection as a downtown resident, much better connection between the waterfront and the downtown. So they actually are really flowing to urban villages.
We'll start the second question. We'll start with Mr. McAuley and come back this way. So the second question is, how do you plan to address negative impacts of the port's various projects, such as noise related to airport operations and the increased traffic related to growth?
Traffic related to growth at the airport?
Right.
Everything the port does has an impact. Obviously, when you're growing an economy, there's more activity, more people, et cetera. In regards to the airports, we already mitigate for traffic. There's a project going on in Bakerview right now that is 2 years earlier than originally intended, because I went to the local Department of Transportation and I said, look, we can fund our portion now if you guys can get started, and they did it early. When we're looking at expanding our general aviation, we're going to mitigate the wetland damage there with 39 new acres of wetlands, which are being they're now in their second year of growth, and they should be well established by the end of next year. We already mitigate for stormwater. We mitigate for building construction. And when it comes to noise, it's no different than any other airport in this world. If there's a noise problem, then we know how to mitigate for it, and we can mitigate for it. We just need to develop a plan that's relevant to our local situation.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Mitigation is a big issue. I come from the garbage business, so there's nobody that knows this better than I. For those of you that don't know, I was in this building last wrestling with Barbara Brenner, which nobody wins when you do that, over a garbage plant. And what you come to realize is that the garbage plant was there, people move in around it, and all of a sudden the garbage plant is the bad guy. And when we take a look at what the port is going to do, our first focus is to make sure we operate this port as a port. And any mitigation that's going to come from that is with that realization in mind. Hempler's had a beautiful little smoking operation downtown until they built a big condo unit behind it. Hempler's can no longer operate that in that area, so they moved to Ferndale. And Bellingham loses that business because a condo went behind it. So when we talk about mitigation, there is a common sense approach to this, but realizing that you have a job to do at the port, and that is run an airport. Jack?
Here we go. Thank you. Mr.
Can
Robbins.
I just finish?
Mitigation in any issue is tough. We did, when we expanded the airport, there were 65 homes that we bought for $11 million. That was the right thing to do as the airport expanded. As a young kid, my father always told me, don't build at the bottom of a hill and don't build near an airport. So if you did build near an airport, you need to know that there are going to be noises. The FAA has a noise level, that once it hits that level, they will do mitigation for your home at an airport. We aren't at that level at this point in time. And, you know, there's noisy growth in an airport is necessary. I like what we've done at our airport. I wish we had an east-west route as well as a north-south.
Please.
So I'd like to put the growth in some numbers perspective. So in 2004, Bellingham Airport had 160,000 passengers per year. We are forecasted by the end of this year at 1.2 million. So we are obviously not a small regional airport anymore, and that's actually a very important business tool that's very much welcome by our business community. It provides economic development. And also, I believe that Port has a responsibility because it is acting on our behalf to recognize that there is impact on everything that we're doing. There is impact. And property values of those residents had gone down. I'm sure if there would be somebody whose property value would go down, yours or mine, we would also be asking at least for the Port to listen. So there are not easy solutions, but one thing that I think the Port ought to be doing is really listening and paying attention and looking for solutions that can be worked out.
Thank you. So we have a third question now, and we'll start, if it's okay with you, with Renata, and go down this way. How do you see your role as Port Commissioner in developing the Port's overall strategy for economic growth in our county?
Sure. So one important thing that has taken place is consolidation of economic development responsibility that now resides with the Port. And in my opinion, what that means is that Port has a great opportunity to be the catalyst for bringing other organizations that are also participating in that. So we can talk as BDC and TAG and Telling Restaurants right there, all the organizations that are already in Whatcom County have an opportunity to be consolidated, and we can actually be developing a plan that answers one of the big questions that I still look for that answer, and which is, who do we want to be as Whatcom County when we grow up in terms of economic development? When I looked at Portland's plan that was issued 5 years ago, they were very, very clear on what are they going to achieve and who they're going to bring to the table and what kind of businesses and industries they're going to foster. And I think we have an opportunity at the Port to be a leader in that and facilitate that conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins?
Well, the Port is charged with the transportation needs of the region. They're also charged with economic development, job creation, and job retention. And I admire that, and I agree with that. That's what they should be doing. So the first thing is jobs, and we should always look at what jobs they can bring. You know, a lot of times we say it's zoned industrial. You might think that's heavy industrial, but it's not really heavy industrial. It can be tech jobs, it can be office jobs, but it's got to be jobs first. I think the mission of the Port, as stated, is good, and I agree with it wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Please.
Jack, I've come to realize it's not you, it's me, so don't. My basic philosophy comes from my business philosophy, and that is that we know who we have creating jobs today. We need to treat the customers that we have today like they are princes, because they are our customers as a port. So you look at the Port as it runs today, and if we're not doing everything we can to help All-American Marine, to help Seaview grow their businesses, it needs to be reassessed, because the majority of new business comes from referrals or it comes from existing customers. And one of the reasons that I'm looking at this is I looked at that $5 million investment in our office building, and I looked at that and said, you know, if we put that $5 million over at Seaview Marine, they'd create 50 more jobs, and he could do something different with that company, and he'll be the first one to tell you. So as we look at how we do economic development, mine is going to be a customer-centric view, and that's because that's what I do as a businessman. Is when they go to a conference or something, we're going to be right there next to them. We're going to make sure that when somebody comes, I'm not listening to you this time. When they come in, when we bring a customer in, we're going to make sure that this port looks perfect for them to site here.
All right, I'm not going to thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please,
So
Mr.
this,
McAuley.
Your Washington public ports are like I said before, they're a little bit unique in the world, especially in our nation, and certainly here in Bellingham. We are the only governments with elected leadership that are tasked with what we are tasked with. And we don't get to do the hard stuff the city councils or the county councils do. Since I've been on the commission, we have doubled the economic development staff. When I got there, there was, now I should back up real quick, that's one of two missions at the port. When I got there, there was one person specifically tasked with economic development. There are now two. Renata mentioned it earlier, and thank you, Mr. Steve Swan, Western's leadership on helping to consolidate the economic developments, different economic development groups that are out there. And I think that overall the port has taken a leadership role, again, with Western's help, in making sure that we don't have a whole lot of activity that's not really generating the outcome we want. Now we've consolidated that, and we're doing much better. If you want an example of how we've reached out in the last 4 years, just ask a commercial fisherman. They know up and down the coast, from Alaska to California, that we're serious about our marine trades here because of something that I did 3 years ago.
Thank you. This question is, we'll start with Dan, go to Renata, and then down the way. Most other elected public bodies making major economic and planning decisions have either 5 or 7 elected members. What do you think about expanding the port's 3-member commission to 5 or even 7 members?
Well, that became before the voters a couple of years back and was turned down to leave it at 3. The disadvantage to it is you can't ever go have a cup of coffee with a commissioner and talk over something that you want to talk about. So I find that a real disadvantage. On the other hand, if you have 3 good commissioners, it works out fine. 5, if we did have 5 though, you would be able to go off and have a chat with one once in a while, and I would see that as an advantage. But, you know, I can't even remember how I voted on that last issue. It meant that much to me.
I've actually looked at some of the airports in our area, and interestingly enough, many of them have 5. That includes Edmonds as well as Port of Seattle and Anacortes. So I will support 5. I believe that having a broader representation and diversity contributes to the thoughts and ideas and well-being. I've built high-performance teams, and for that reason, I also would like to bring some very simple techniques for workability on the board, like using Robert's Rules of Order. And
Still trying.
Still trying. Yeah, I got it. So there was something about the number as well as number of how we working as a team, or in the sense a board together, to really make decisions in the most efficient way. And I think that there is places to improve on both sides, and I'd like to be part of that.
Thank you. Mr. Bell?
I'm unequivocal on this. I'm a big fan of having 5 because of that very reason that Dan just stated. When you have just 3 members, one powerful member can really sway the others in a unproductive manner. When you have 5, there's a little bit more stability. It's well worth the cost. The cost isn't worth maybe the downside. And the ability to go in and talk over something, and I, as you have seen, I think out loud. And having that ability in a public forum is not always a good thing, as you have seen. So having those backroom chats and having those conversations with somebody and making them real and having conversations about what you believe, how you believe it, and what should be done is an important part of the process. And if you're prohibited from doing that, then you have taken away a very useful tool in a decision maker's process. So I'm a fan of increasing it to 5.
Thank you. Mr. McAuley?
So I do remember how I voted. I voted against it, but I'll tell you why. I'm not opposed to having 5 commissioners. There are 5 ports in the state that have 5 commissioners. 2 of them, Seattle and Tacoma, both started with 5 commissioners in the early 1900s. But The problem that I had was something that Ken just mentioned, which was backroom conversations. And when I was first seated in 2010, one of the things that I'd heard repeatedly from the previous year was that the commissioners don't listen, they make all their choices in the back room. So with 3 commissioners, and I have never done this, not once, I have never had a backroom conversation with Jim or Scott. Every conversation I've had with them has been in the public eye. With 5 commissioners, I could have done those things. I could have had all kinds of conversations and tried to manipulate the outcomes that I was in favor of. So until we have commissioners that are committed to open public process, I can't support 5. But I could work with 5. If we had 5, I can work with that.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Mike. Sure. Okay. How would you specifically involve the community in the port's decision-making?
Well, first thing would be to move our meetings to the evenings. 3 years in a row, I've been voted down on that. 2 years in a row, I thought we'd have it this year. $22,000 was in our final budget conversation about broadcasting on BTV 10, and that failed at the last minutes in our conversations last year. So hopefully the new commission, I'm assuming all 4 of us up here would support that for next year. But the easiest thing to do is move our meetings and broadcast. I have, on my own, gone out. I comment on every single Herald article that's online that's ever written about the port. I make my phone number available to anybody. Surprisingly enough, I get far fewer calls than you might imagine. And I just try to make myself available because the commission has not committed to doing that. So hopefully in January, we will have some of those changes made and the port will be more accessible.
Thank you. Mr. Bell.
Yeah, I get in trouble for supporting that evening meeting because my wife, enough said, my wife would like to have me home a little earlier in the day. I'm on the planning commission now for Whatcom County, and those meetings start at 6:30 at night, and we don't get home oftentimes until 11 o'clock, and it's a rough day. But as far as open meetings, there are certainly times when there are very important things on the agenda, and even if we don't go to an evening meeting as a standard basis, there are times when you need to have more public meetings. I'm a big fan of openness and fairness, and everybody seeing what we do as a public entity. We're dealing with your money. We're dealing with your assets. So you should know what it is that we're discussing and how we're doing it and what our decisions are.
Thank you.
I beat you.
Mr. Robbins.
I'm told we tried evening meetings and we didn't get any bigger attendance, and it was a little tougher on the staff at the port. But I'm not opposed to evening meetings. Doesn't matter to me if they're during the day or in the evening. I do think we always need to have that comment period. Even though some port meetings that I've been to, there's absolutely no one that makes comment 1. I think it's still important to have them because as a port commissioner, I would certainly want to hear from the citizens of this community, and they should have an opportunity to step up and make a statement anytime they want to the commissioners. But as far as an evening meeting, doesn't matter to me one way or the other.
Please, Renata. Thank you.
So this is one of the 3 issues that I'm running on. I strongly believe in transparency and accountability of our office. Port is stewarding our publicly owned assets, and it's acting on our behalf, and I believe that its dealings should reflect that. Yes to moving in the evening, yes to televising. I also personally, on my campaign, have been doing Walk with Renata. There are posted dates on my website, and this is part of reaching out and saying, if you're a walker like me and you want to walk and talk about, apparently there are brain studies that it really creates new brainwaves and creativity. So I incorporated that, the idea of walking along the port properties and having conversations that envision what that would look like and really engage in dialogues that matter. And that's the kind of that's the kind of commitment I want to bring to that position.
Thank you. For this question, we'll start with Mr. McAuley. What do you think should be the level of cleanup for the waterfront redevelopment project, and why?
You know, on the one hand, a flip answer would be it doesn't really matter what I think the cleanup should be, and I'll explain why real quick. I believe that this community would like a $10 cleanup. but we only have $8. So whether or not I want it to be greater or more than it's going to be, it's almost irrelevant. All I can do is push for our staff and our other leadership, especially the Commission and City Council, to find more dollars to do more cleanup. And right now, we don't have enough money to do everything that everybody wants to do, which is a terrible shame. And I'm a little nervous that when it really boils down to it, we may not have the money that we even imagined we ever would need. So we're going to have to find more funding sources. I'm absolutely believing that we need to find more funding support. And if you put me back in January, I will definitely push for that. Where that funding's coming from right now, it's anyone's guess, though.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Well, this is in my wheelhouse. My company does cleanup operations. We just finished one for a major oil company up in the Yukon Territory where we literally had to clean things up. My philosophy comes from this. When you have, the way I describe it to my kids is when you poop in the pool, you got to get it out. I'm not a big fan of capping anything. I'm a big fan of making sure that we do the right cost-benefit analysis on anything we do. If we take and leave contamination in place and put a cap over it and leave it for nothing but parkland, we get no return on that land as an investment. If we can do a cost-benefit analysis and say what part of this land can be cleaned up completely and return it back to productive use, it has a different cost-benefit analysis than it does if you don't return anything back. So the other side of that is I've capped a landfill. I understand what that means. You don't sleep at night knowing that you've got something sitting there. If I'm there, it is going to be more expensive. We've got to find more ways to go back and find maybe GP or others to help us clean it up.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Robbins.
The cleanup is really important, no question about it. I'm thinking it's going to be close to $150 million by the time that's cleaned up. They built the new football stadium at the University of Washington for $280 million, to give you a perspective. We are spending lots of money on this. When the agencies, the regulatory agencies, agree on the cleanup procedure, I would turn to those experts. If they all agree and say that's cleaned up enough, I would go with that. I mean, you could clean it up forever. One lady came to me and she said she wanted the dirt down at the GP site clean enough for her children to eat. I'm not sure how clean that needs to be, but we need to be reasonable about this. I do want it cleaned up, no question, but I think the agencies have done a good job in telling us what needs to be done there.
Thank you. Ms. Kowalczyk?
Yes, this is a really tough one because the cost of it is exuberant today. And when I think about the cleanup, I also think about the cost in the future. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, our children, our grandchildren, and what the cost could be to them if we don't do the cleanup that we ought to be doing. So I'm advocating for unrestricted cleanup, meaning having to be at the level that it's appropriate for humans if they live there and play there, not just an industrial type of cleanup.
Good, thank you. So the last question that I have, or our program committee has, and we'll start with Mr. McAuley and come this way. How do you assess the port's current relationship with the city of Bellingham?
That's a good question. How many city council members here? Is Kelly here? I would say it's good, and I think it's partially because there's been some change in leadership and me at the port, and then I know the city council people. Many of them are friends. Kelly Linville has become a friend in the last few years, and I think that those friendships are critical to having good conversations. And by the way, I'm watching Kelly and Jack Laus develop a friendship and seeing how they are working together because they know who the other is. I think that's doing a great job for the city and county. The same thing has happened at the port, and I think we're far better off and far further down the road than we would have otherwise been.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bell.
Just from an outward appearance, because I don't have any inside take, the relationship's been much better. I think the current working relationship between the city and the port has been phenomenal. It needs to stay that way. Again, this goes back to my core belief. If we're going to go attract people, we need to have a united front. And it needs to be a county-wide united front. And it means that we have to bring the county in, we have to bring the city in, we have to bring organized labor in because they're going to have a role. We're going to have to bring the port in, and we're all going to have to get along. And we're all going to have to see the same vision as we go try to attract somebody, because the last attempts to do that have been failures because they came in here and saw a disorganized, disruptive, completely dysfunctional place to come bring their business. And I don't think that's what we want to present. I've seen huge strides made both at the city and the county level to work with the port, and I see that as being nothing but a positive.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
I think this, from my assessment, and it's only from being at Port Commission meetings and observing what happens there and talking with Kelly Linville, our mayor, I think it's really positive now. I think it's much better than it was the past 4 years. I was really appreciative to see Rob Fix, the executive director at the Port of Bellingham, and Kelly stand up together and endorse the Planning Commission's plan. Obviously, they are on the same page. I think that's good. I think Jack Lowes is communicating. I think all three of those entities are communicating and working things out, and I think it's all for the positive, and I feel good about it.
Thank you. Ms. Kowalczyk.
I echo the sentiment that definitely there has been a shift in how we relate to one another, how we listen to one another. Clearly in the shout outs and disagreements, nothing gets done, just we kick our heels. So we can already see the results that come from people being willing to come to the table, both on three sides, county as well as the city and the port. One thing that that Mayor Kelly and I had chatted on a few occasions about, it's my background in Lean Six Sigma. It provides me an interesting insight as to process improvement and getting a waste out of the processes. And that's something that the county is looking, following what the Kitsap County had done and how much they've been able to get the waste out of their process and improve experience with getting permits. We've been chatting what would it look like if all three, county, city, and the port, had united front gone through the process of streamlining the processes and making those organizations better for you.
Thank you. And that brings to a conclusion the questions from here. Now it's your turn. We have two microphones circulating. On this side of the room, our program chair, Don Keenan, and on this side of the room, program committee member Joe Garcia. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand. And again, you can address a specific candidate, and the other candidates have the opportunity to respond as well. Okay, so questions from the audience.
This is a question for all the candidates. You will be responsible for a lot of public funds. So on a personal note, what type of work have you done that will help you in making these port budget decisions?
So it's to all of you, so anyone can just start if you want to. Yes.
It's been unfair. I haven't started any of them yet, so I'll start this one. That's been my job, is to take care of funds. I turned around warehouser operations that were losing money and turned them into profitable companies. And we turned 4 separate operations around for 4 different reasons. And as a steward of the public funds, that's our highest priority. As far as reducing the tax burden, taxes should not be any higher than they absolutely have to be. Our job is to try to find a way to make the port the most efficient place it can be. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?
No, sir.
He's just trying to shut me up. But that's what I do.
Anyone else?
Well, managing or being president of or owner of 7 different businesses, it gives you a whole perspective. When you have When you have 150 employees under you and you're responsible as an owner of that business, when you're responsible for their welfare, for their check, for their health care and their dental care, it gives you a whole perspective when you look at something from a business standpoint than if you've never had that experience. We have a family-held business on Hood Canal, an oyster and a clam business, and it's owned by 45 first or second cousins, all family members. And believe me, I've been on that board for 40 years and vice president of that company, and we can still all sit down and have a beer when it's over.
Anyone else want to respond?
Sure, I'll jump in on this. So I do differ from some of the other candidates here. I do not believe the Port of Bellingham is a business. It is tasked with supporting business in our economy, but it's not a business. If you take a look at what the job of a commissioner is, we're not supposed to be running a business. We're not supposed to be profitable. I guess the most likely way to describe it would be to say it's a not-for-profit. And having said that, though, I would point out in the last 4 years, we have had a clean audit from the states every single year with no issues. We have improved our bottom line every single year with no issues. And the very first, now let me put that in context. The very first year I was on the commission, I argued for and I got a 5% tax cut from every single landowner, or for every single landowner in this county. The last 2 budget cycles, we've held that firm. So in the middle of a recession, we gave the citizens a tax cut, and we improved our bottom line. So I think I've done pretty good for the last 4 years.
Renata, you want to respond?
Oh, absolutely. So 3 different examples. One comes from a large corporate world. That's the beauty of being a vice president in JP Morgan Chase and Merrill Lynch. You get to be put on really big projects, and one of them in JP Morgan Chase was we were actually having, let's look at 5 different locations, 2,000 employees, and make a decision, was in checks processing area, and make a decision for the whole bank, looking at budgets, looking at what's the future of that industry, and how we're going to be managing going forward. So that's one example on the large scale. I had the honor to sit on the Board of Trustees of Caution Community Land Trust. I know the dean somewhere here. I was on the Finance Committee, not surprisingly, working with other members on balancing that budget, so I have an insight on what it's like to actually be relying on grants and being non-for-profit. And the third one, in my current role, I'm a business consultant, so I work with small and medium-sized companies, and I help them go what I call the scavenger hunt into their budget, looking for cash.
Thank you. Don, do you have a question? Yes.
Thank you. We've heard from you for 40 minutes, and you started out by saying you've been doing a lot of these forums. My question for each one of you is, what distinguishes you most from your opponent?
So, who wants it? Mike, please
Sure,
start.
I'll start. I think I sort of stated that in my last answer with the business reference I made. I am a small business person, and if you look at the port's budget, my personal business pales in comparison to our $32 million operating budget. We also manage $380 million of public property on behalf of every citizen in this county. And I believe the biggest difference between Ken and I is that we're not a business. Right? We're supposed to support the economy and support business. That's why the legislature gave us the right to tax you in order to do those things that supports our economy, like build infrastructure, new bulkheads, the non-sexy things that I like to say is it's sort of like, the port's sort of like an operating system on your computer. You should never even know we're there, but without us, a lot of things would just fall apart, and I think we all know what happens when our operating systems fail. So I'd say, personally, that's probably our biggest difference, is how we approach what the port does, how it does it, and my belief in public service and what I bring to the Port Commission.
Mr. Bell?
You know, I hate these kind of questions because I like Mike. He has my sense of humor, and he's a great guy. And you don't want to really ever speak badly, but we are different. I have a very different perspective on life, and I have a very different perspective on the way things run. And I have a bigger vision, and my vision comes from, I'm not a very detailed person. I'm more of a out-of-the-box type of thinker. And what I bring is the ability to see the big picture and to understand how to communicate to companies that use ports, because that's the business I'm in. I can go to Seaview, and we literally finish each other's sentences because I'm in the business, and I understand what the needs are. I understand what the infrastructures are. I've run a company, so I know when I look at the port staff, what can be done there to make it better. And it's intuitive with me, and that's really the difference between us.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
And the question is, what differentiates us between the two of us? Well, number one, right now, 12 minutes ago, the America's Cup just started for the final race, and I think I'd rather be there than here. And I don't know if that makes me different, but being an avid sailor, I'd like to see how Oracle's doing. If you've got it on your phone, don't tell me. The big difference really is owning a business rather than working in a corporation, business ownership. Oh, I hope that's not the results of the race. Owning a business and risking your own capital to own a business and longevity in the community, I think, are the two glaring differences between Ms. Kowalczyk and myself.
Ms. Kowalczyk, please.
Absolutely. So two differences. One, I actually chose to live here. I spent half of my life under oppressive communist and political regime. I know what it's like to live in an economy that doesn't work. I've lived and worked in different places, so I bring fresh perspective and ideas from all the experiences that I had. The other is, and I'll tell it through the quick story because you get to see how I view leadership. When commercial fishermen approached me and they said that they will be endorsing my candidacy, I told them that the only way I can really represent them is by them putting me on the boat, because I've never been a commercial fisherwoman. So I don't know what it's like to earn a living that way. They've never had a port candidate, who otherwise was not a fisherman, to make that request, and they ignored me for 2 months, but I kept persisting. And 2 weeks, I spent 36 hours on a commercial fishing boat with skipper and 2 crewmen, learning firsthand what it's like to earn that dollar that way.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question, which would be over here, I'd forgotten that someone earlier had given me a lens which they found on the floor. It's, I guess, from somebody's glasses. So if you're missing a lens, it's up here. So please.
Just don't poke yourself with a finger.
That's right.
So for me, the elephant in the room is a railroad. And I haven't heard anyone speak to how there is an intention to interact with the increasing railroad traffic and what its impact will be on all of your properties, or all the properties that we own that you will be overseeing.
Is this directed to anyone particular or to all?
So all of them.
Okay. Anyone want to start?
I actually have some history with this. I was the only commissioner to send a letter in the scoping comments during the GPT scoping process. I did ask at our commission support what I had written, and they did not, so I sent it on my own, but as a representative of the people of this county. I had 2 particular issues that I believe are relevant to the port in regards to railroad traffic. And this isn't just specific to port waterfront properties in Bellingham, but we know that increased rail traffic will block commerce and commuters, and that has a cost. And I ask that the people that look at that do that in the EIS. And the other one was the an economic analysis of the proposed Cherry Point terminal. And again, because this is the port's business, is understanding our local economy and promoting those things that help and not supporting those things that hurt. That is an addendum that would be in the EIS. I'm not sure that's actually going to be in there. And I've also been working with the city on a quiet zone for the Bellingham waterfront. 11 crossings, 4 honks per crossing. There's your math.
Thank you. Sir, Mr. Bell.
the railroad is a key portion of our infrastructure, and it's like the airport. We need rail service to adequately service the port. The one thing the port is lacking right now is a rail siding at the port property to help us move materials. It is still less expensive. It is still less fossil fuel burning. It is still the most efficient way to move things from A to B. And what this port has been lacking is a good place for us to bring an industry in where we have access to a siding. It has nothing to do with the Gateway Pacific Terminal, because that's not something that's on the port's venue right now. It is something that's in everybody else's venue, but we don't have to address that. What I do see from the port standpoint is that we're in charge of transportation. That's what we're tasked with. The port is responsible for the ferry terminal, responsible for the Amtrak, and our job is to oversee those assets the best we can, and that would be my focus.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
When my dad said don't build it at an airport and don't build at the bottom of the hill, his dad told him not to build near a railroad track, but he didn't listen to him. And I grew up at Lake Whatcom with my bedroom not 30 feet from the tracks as that train went by twice a day. I got used to it. I would rather see more transportation by rail than on the highways. We need a rail spur down at the waterfront in order to do the commerce that we need. We don't control that. It's a political issue. We need access to that waterfront without it being blocked by trains, and we need to take that into consideration in anything we do with railroads.
Please.
So I view port's responsibility as number one responsibility to all of us, taxpayers and voters. Port is in charge of stewarding our publicly owned assets. What that means is that we ought to be concerned about how the increased train traffic will impact the value of our properties. And how could potentially impact the ability to get in and out of those places and not only conduct commerce, but also be able to enjoy the waterfront. The good thing is that it is now part of the EIS study, and we will be hearing from Olympia at some point what that impact might be. That's my hope.
Don has a questioner.
I'm from a flying family, and I would like to know what you plan to do in the future to accommodate the small plane and corporate plane business. We have Salmon Islands out here with countless private planes and corporate planes coming in and out that buy groceries and buy gas and come here to shop, etc. And that's enough of the question. What are you planning to do for them? You've been doing fine, but I mean, what next?
And I assume that's to all. I guess it is. Renata, you want to start with that one?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is would be to understand, that would be my take on it. It's to understand where their needs are and are they being accommodated by the county facilities, and be able to evaluate what could be the port doing to help those GA industries, those particular airlines, to provide the service that they provide. Because if they fly in groceries to the islands, that's an important service.
I met with the GA folks, the private plane people, and their biggest complaint was the rate they pay for their hangars out there. And they've got a very legitimate gripe. They've had 2 appraisals done, one by an organization they hired and one that the port hired, and they were far apart. They've got to come to an agreement on that. But the only complaint I heard from those folks was just that, the amount they were paying for their lease of the hangars. But I anticipate it should grow like anything else grows at the airport with need. We should grow and manage it.
Mr. Bell.
Your opinion was pretty clear. So thank you for asking a question and helping me answer it. That's actually not my answer. The answer is you're my customer, and you're part of what we do. The airport is where it is, It's always going to be there. I've said before that if you think we're going to site another airport, after getting through the jail siting, it pales by comparison. Right? So we've got an airport. You're part of our customer base. We need to service you better. We need to attract more of you. And it fits kind of into one of the discussions we had a little bit earlier. At some level, we have to make that commitment to you as a customer that we're going to help you, because that's our job, is to advocate for east-west routes and for planes coming into the airport. Our job is to service you as a port. That's what we're tasked to do.
Mr. McAuley?
So about 2 years ago, we finalized the initial steps with the county to enlarging our GA capacity, so more hangar space and better runway access. We've invested several $1 million in apron improvements for GA in the last 3 years. And also, and just so you folks know, this is a very difficult thing to manage. Nationally, GA, general aviation, is a declining part of the industry. Although locally, we hear that people want more of this, even though our smartest consultants tell us that we should expect less GA traffic in the future. But those are the small individually owned planes. I have asked our airport director to prepare a plan for our GA terminal to attract more of the corporate types of flyers and those people like our Sky Ferry and those companies. Right now, we're not doing that very well because we're focused on our terminal across the street. When we're done with that, I'm hoping that we can come up with a plan that will serve our GA, especially the commercial part of the GA, much better than we have.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one last question over here from Joe.
Good. Okay. So when I look at a map of the area where I live, I see the freeway, and I see the airport, and I see the waterfront, and I look at these sought-after neighborhoods that are sandwiched in between there, that have been kind of quietly doing fine, and now with the increase in waterfront and the increase in airport, and then to get the access to the freeway, I want to know what impact you see on those historical and sought-after neighborhoods, if all this all happens the way we're all talking about it.
Anyone can attempt that one? Yes, sir.
I guess I'll start. So I did my undergraduate work in urban studies, specifically urban ecology. I did my graduate work up at Western in resource management through the geography program, and I wrote my graduate thesis on growth and growth management here in Whatcom County. So I've got a pretty good educational understanding of how cities grow and the impacts that occur during that city growth. So this is an infilling region. This is an infilling county, and we have the Growth Management Act that wants more people within the city's boundaries. So in the case of where Ms. Barker lives around the airport, there are certain mitigation things that, as a proper steward of your public assets, I have got to address her issue. Doesn't mean we can do anything, but I have to address it. And it's the same with the traffic. I'm not sure what we can do. When it happens, we will address it. And that's, I think that's critical for any port commissioner. Where in the past, the port has been able to sort of slide through. Now we're becoming much more part of the growth of this community and this region than ever before. So it's the new commissioners have a very different job than they used to.
Mr. Bell, want to try it?
Yeah, you clearly have empathy for what's happening, but as you bring people into urban areas, there are going to be urban impacts. And part of that urban impact is that you're going to bring them closer to commerce. That has to be a community discussion about what you're moving into. If you want the pristine life that you would find in Nooksack, you're not going to find it as you move into the city. You can't necessarily have industrial activity on the port and the quality of life that you would expect on farmland in Everson. So there is that discussion. And the discussion is what is tolerable, and it's different for everybody. It's impossible to address everybody's concern. So what we have to do as a port is mitigate what we can, where we can, under agreed upon terms, and that is our goal, is to figure out what those reasonable places are where mitigation and what types of mitigation need to be done. But we cannot do that for everybody. We have to take steps to keep the industry growing where it needs to grow.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
There's no question with any increase in population, there's going to be impacts. But I think we need to look at the positive impacts as well as the negative impacts. From the port standpoint, from the positive impacts, every time I bring out-of-town guests, we go somewhere on the waterfront because I enjoy what we've done down there. The Bellwether area is fun to go to. It's enjoyable. Taylor Dock is a wonderful walk. You go down to Marine Park. Right next to industrial site is a marine park that's enjoyable. So I don't focus that much on the negative impacts. I mean, we need to deal with them, but we also need to look at the positive impacts. The airport out here, to be able to jump on a plane and fly down and watch Mariners at spring training or take a trip to Vegas in short order, I think is great. I enjoy our airport. But I do understand there are impacts that we need to mitigate when we can.
Thank you. And Ms. Kowalczyk.
I take very seriously the fact that port commissioners are your elected representatives and they are stewarding your assets. And as taxpayers, you contribute to the budget of the port. And that also means that as a port, we have a responsibility to first acknowledge if there is an impact, not shy away from it, not pretend that it's not there. Acknowledge that it's there, listen, and creatively coming to the table together looking for solutions. There are never easy ones, and everybody knows that. But I believe that it's a responsibility of elected officials to listen to the people who elected them and mitigate for things that impact their quality of life.
Thank you very much. And before we thank our 4 candidates for the excellent job they did today, I want to remind us to thank at some point the City of Bellingham technical unit for the wonderful job they're doing in filming this and putting it on air on Channel 10 at 5 o'clock 2 days from now, and then again on Sunday. So if you want to see it again or tell your friends how wonderful this is, please let them know. Now it's time to thank our 4 candidates. After they give a 1-minute closing statement. So, thank you for the reminder. I guess I started with my own closing statement, but we can start with anyone who wants to begin. Renata, do you want to do it?
I'll keep it quick so Jack is not nervous. My 3 areas of focus, it's one is really supporting working waterfront and marine trades and being able to balance the environmental stewardship, bringing the jobs here, and really creating this as an access to the people as well as source of thriving Whatcom County. The second one is the airport growth and making sure that we're utilizing this asset in much better way than we currently are. It's an asset and it can be leveraged much more. 2 ways, just quickly. One, we should be finding a way to keep the passenger dollars here and through restaurants and other ways so they don't actually drive up north away. And 2, we should be finding a ways around at the airport and properties to support local businesses, especially those that need shipping. 3, it's the transparency, accountability that I've talked about. So in summary, I believe that in November, you'll have a choice to make between business as usual and fresh new perspective, and I hope you choose wisely in November.
Thank you. Mr. Robbins, you're next.
Jack, you and I have become friends here, haven't we? Jack, huh? We've been done all right?
That's 5 seconds.
Now 10.
I would be honored to serve as your port commissioner for the next 4 years. As you've heard, I'm the commissioner with the business experience and the longevity in the community. I've been endorsed by all 6 mayors of the small cities in Whatcom County. I've also been endorsed by the Longshoremen's Union because they understand, as I do, we need jobs in this community. Community leaders such as Brian Griffin, Pete Kremen, along with State Senator Erickson, Representative Buys, and Overstreet have also endorsed my candidacy. You can read more about me and see my endorsers by going to my website, Vote Dan Robbins for Port Commissioner, or, and my grandchildren have waited a long time for me to say this, you can friend me on Facebook. and vote danrobbins.com. Thank you for being involved in the political process and allowing us to speak today. I'd very much appreciate your vote in this important election. Perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Bell.
Now, this is a hard part for me too because it's difficult to talk about yourself, but you can go back to my webpage, it's kenforport.com, and see who is behind me and what I'm about. You can go to my company website, which is bestrecycling.com, and see what I do, and you'll see that what I do is, this is in my wheelhouse. I have been to more ports around the globe, seen how they work. I've been to Chile, I've been to Port Fourchon, Louisiana, my boat comes into Port Hueneme, California. I've offloaded boats, I've offloaded containers. I understand what a working port does. It is in my wheelhouse. I'm in the cleanup business. I understand what a cleanup looks like. It's what I do. So when you look at what your decision for making a port, you're going to find that this really is what I do. It's in my wheelhouse. And as you make that decision, I would ask you to go to those places to take a look.
Thank you very much. Mr. McAuley.
So, you know, a quick follow-up on what Ken said. Our port is incredibly unique. It's not just shipping, it's not just shipping containers. It's airport, it's free trade zones, it's waterfront, it's marinas, it's everything that you know about our port. And understanding every one of those is the critical thing when you're voting. Are you voting for someone who understands every part of that or just some part of it? Because inevitably, the commissioner is a part-time job. I'm not there 24/7 like the staff are. And if we give up too much control to the staff to make decisions on your behalf, because the commissioners aren't there all the time making the best decisions for the economy, our region, and our local businesses, then we haven't elected the right people. More than 80% of our waterfront businesses support me. Those businesses represent thousands of local jobs. Just about every commercial fisherman in this county supports me. Hundreds more local jobs. So this fall in November, I do hope you'll vote for me, and thank you for your time today.
And thank you for coming. Thank you all for coming.